This video will deal with types of work flexibility. It'll look at different approaches to employment of staff and the type of working arrangements that they may undertake. Now, organisations have long understood the importance of flexibility in the workplace, and they've identified the connection between organisational performance and flexibility. So it's now on the agenda, at least in most business schools and in business courses, that the performance of an organisation is linked intricately with the flexibility of its workforce and their ability to multitask where possible, but also to pick up the slack when people are away ill or people are on holidays, that the organisation is able to maintain its presence in the marketplace, apparently unaffected by absenteeism or by staff on holidays or whatever. So flexibility has become quite a big issue in the journals. All organisations tend to opt for some form of flexibility. For example, employees are laid off or made redundant when an organisation is underperforming. Well, that's a type of flexibility. It's not one we think of in pleasant terms, because redundancy is never nice. But it depends on the types of contract that the employees had, or it depends on the terms of the redundancy. But certainly if an organisation is going through a bad period, then it can't afford to maintain the workforce perhaps, and therefore redundancies are inevitable. Also, employees are offered overtime pay when the organisation is booming. Again, it's a type of flexibility. They're trying to stretch the available resource to cover a peak in demand, and to do it by compensating the workers by paying them perhaps time and a half or double time. In other words, the hourly rate is doubled if they work extra time. So it's looking for flexibility. It's attempting to stretch the existing workforce to cover the shortfall. Of course, if the boom period was seen as permanent, then the company would take on extra workers. Rather than pay the existing workers time and a half or double time, it would be cheaper to employ additional workers. So companies are constantly reviewing flexibility and the possibilities of flexibility within the labour force, looking for ways in which the workforce can be engaged on different contracts and engaged to meet booms and slumps in demand for the product. The concept of flexibility has gained considerable interest because globalisation has put it on the map. Competition and the rise of e-commerce has resulted in unpredictable markets. So globalisation, more intense competition as a consequence of globalisation, but also as a consequence of perhaps more company startups, and also the rise in e-commerce and e-business. All of these have resulted in unpredictable markets. So companies need to have more flexibility. There is more uncertainty about trading conditions. There are also new technologies and different ways of working. In some cases, they've eliminated the need for employees. When very powerful applications, for example databases or scheduling programs, when many, even indeed the standard Excel spreadsheet and software like that, but when these have come into the workforce, it's meant that fewer people are required. But also it means that the existing workforce can operate more flexibly. They don't have to work in a particular situation. They don't have to work particular hours. Perhaps there's more emphasis on moving from measuring the employees' inputs to measuring the employees' outputs, because the outputs can be achieved anywhere. With internet connections and with good software and good computing facilities, the workforce are not necessarily tied to their desks. There's also the decline in the power of trade unions, and this has handed more control to management. So management are trying to force through flexibility. The unions are less capable of fighting because of various pieces of legislation and a fall in numbers who are joining the trade union movements. So management have more power and more power to explore flexibility. There's also a changing attitude to work, and it's given rise to flexible working practices. People now will work on Sundays, whereas perhaps in the past they wouldn't. Companies may want to have workers for different patterns of work, because the workers are important and the company has compromised and will start perhaps the day at an unusual time, unusual compared to what happened, say, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So employees may start work at 11 o'clock in the morning when they have already delivered their children to school. They may leave at 2 o'clock so they can collect their children from school. And then they may work at home for some period of time, and so it's much more flexible the way working arrangements are currently configured and are evolving. They're changing all the time. There are different types of flexibility that can be adopted by an organisation. These are functional, numerical, temporal, locational, and financial. And we'll look at these briefly in the coming slides. But there are different types of approach to flexibility that organisations may take. We'll look at these, as I said. So we'll start with functional. Now, functional flexibility is based on developing a multi-skilled workforce. All workers are competent in carrying out a range of tasks. And that contrasts again starkly with what happened in the past, when workers had a single task and they worked day in, day out on the single task. A very boring situation for the workers. There was no job enrichment, there was no variation in the type of work. Now there's more emphasis on flexibility, where workers can move. As I said earlier, if someone is away ill or someone's on holidays or whatever, then other members of the workforce can step in and perform those tasks as well. So there's flexibility, and there are training programs perhaps initiated by management, attended by the employees, which will equip the employees, as I said earlier, to multitask, to be able to perform different tasks and to perform these tasks to a high quality. This approach is very common in manufacturing and the service sectors, where employees are required to work a range of shifts and duties. It's often the case, for example, people working in restaurants can lay the table, but they can also work the till. They can also serve drinks in the bar. They can even perhaps cook simple dishes. The chefs in some restaurants can cook a variety of dishes, not just one dish, but a whole variety. And there is increasing flexibility in the use of the labour force. In manufacturing it's the same. Someone may operate a particular machine, but later in the day may switch over to a different machine or be able to perform a different task. There is functional flexibility. Employees are trained with skills that are transferable and skills that may be used for career development. There's always been a debate about transferable skills and non-transferable skills. Organisations in the past were seen as being keen to develop their employees with non-transferable skills, so that if the employee left the place of employment, they'd find it difficult to find another job because their skills were unique to that particular company. It was a way almost of locking in the employees. The employees found it difficult to change jobs. Transferable skills are ones which do move with the person. So if the person leaves one organisation and joins another, they can use essentially the same skills. So those are transferable. Now, the approaches associated with reducing the number of job descriptions and encouraging team working. So in team working, the members of the team can perform a variety of tasks and they work together to perform those tasks. But also, if a worker has got several skills, then it's difficult to classify that worker. The job description is vague because the worker can do several particular tasks. So the worker may not be uniquely employed for a particular machine or a particular process. The worker can do several things. So job descriptions, the number of job descriptions has been reduced. And it also encourages team working where, as I said earlier, the employees who are working on the teams can step in and help each other and share the responsibility of generating the output. It encourages staff reduction, focuses on job rotation and shift work, which reduces the need for staff. Flexibility, if it's optional, it's welcomed by the labour force, by the workforce. If it's enforced or if it's pushed on the workers, it may be resisted. But by and large, this type of flexibility, this functional flexibility we're talking about, can lead to a reduction in staff because the staff are able to move seamlessly between one task to the next. It focuses on job rotation, which is actually a good thing because it enhances the work experience. It's job enrichment. People find it pleasant to work in that environment because they're getting a wider variety of experiences. They are human beings and they do need mental stimulation. They need to engage with the work. So job rotation is good. But shift work may be welcome. It depends. It depends on the circumstances and the hours and what has been agreed with the workforce. The approach allows easy cover for absences, as I said earlier. It saves costs for the organisation and employees can easily progress to different areas within the organisation. So we have job enrichment, employees moving from one part of the organisation to the next. We have cost savings because skills are passed even between the employees. They see each other performing particular tasks and they'll learn by watching and perhaps learn by doing. But also problems caused by absenteeism, perhaps due to illness or due to holidays, these are easily covered and the organisation is able to maintain its presence in the market. Now there's numerical flexibility. Well, numerical flexibility is mainly adopted for the core workers. Functional flexibility is for the core workers, and numerical flexibility is concerned with the periphery. Now this is based on the work of Atkinson, and the Atkinson model is made available in separate notes on the course where you can read up what was meant by this. There are some PDFs, for example, and also a video pending on this one. But as far as we're concerned here, numerical flexibility is concerned with the periphery. Now, what Atkinson meant by the periphery is these are workers which are not core. They are workers that are required, but which are in a sense more flexibly used. In other words, they pick up tasks which are more universally understood and more universally doable. In other words, virtually any member of staff could perform these tasks. They're on the periphery of the organisation. They're not core, they're not central to the production process. They are performing tasks which are essential, but almost anyone can do them. They're low skilled, and they're not fundamental. They can be picked up by other members of staff and performed as and when required. So they make life easy for the organisation. They ensure all of the tasks are completed, but these particular tasks are low skilled, not completely essential perhaps, but can be done as and when required. So in this case, the company has numerical flexibility. They may employ a full complement of workers to complete these tasks, or from time to time they may fall under that number and try to use other flexible methods to get the existing workforce to perhaps do some overtime, or to come in at the weekends, or to be flexible about when they can perform the tasks, and perhaps pay them something extra for it. The focus on numerical flexibility is on employees on different forms of atypical contract. So generally speaking, the employees in this numerical flexibility context have a more atypical type of contract. It's not a standard contract. This approach is useful when the organisation seeks to employ more workers in a short space of time. So it's when the company is trying to recruit workers very fast, the contracts are very simple or very straightforward. They're also not typical long-term contracts. They are perhaps short-term contracts which give the company the option of reviewing the contract, and also gives the employees the option of reviewing the contracts and looking at their jobs and looking at what the market is paying, and gives them the flexibility to move on. But gives the organisation the flexibility as well to review performance and review what is happening, and perhaps identify areas where training is required for some people, or perhaps the people are not suited to the business, whatever, or look to try and get a better solution if the workers were not completely satisfactory. Employees are employed on different contracts, usually short term, as I said, temporary or even seasonal work, making it easy to lay off staff or terminate contracts when there is no need for the staff. So the company has much more flexibility in this case. Employers have more control over the number of employees they recruit and the demand for labour. So the employers are able to take on some staff, get the work done, review which members of staff are working well and have integrated well, and perhaps either retrain the ones who haven't or lay them off. Contract terms are temporary. There is less emphasis on employee development and training programs, generally speaking. It may be that the company is more generous in its dealing with the workforce and will offer training, but not all will. Some may simply decide that the tasks that are required in with this type of flexibility, the tasks are so straightforward and so basic that training is not needed. And if the employee can't do it, then they're simply not suitable to that sort of employment. Now, temporary flexibility. This approach to flexibility focuses on refining total hours of work against labour demand. So it's temporary. It focuses on refining the total hours of work against the labour demand. So it works out how many hours work is required and looks at the demand for labour. It's becoming a common approach where workers are only paid for the hours they work. So the company tries to work out how many hours work it requires and then tries to find employees who will work for that number of hours. This saves costs for the organisation as they are not paying workers when there's no labour demand. So workers are only required when there is work to be done. Now this means that the company has great flexibility, but of course there is a downside here, that the workers only can work when the company says so. Well, the workers are people. They may have obligations, family obligations for example, and it may not be in their interest to have this type of flexibility. So it's quite a controversial approach. It includes flexi time, 0 hour, hourly and annual schemes. It's all to the advantage of the employer. It means that the employee may be required for a few hours every day, may not be required tomorrow, might be required for a few hours the next day, but it sounds like it's very good in terms of productivity and for the long-run stability of the business and the ability of the business to compete in the market and so on. It sounds that, which I suppose it is, but it's also not very nice for the employee who may be dependent upon that work to feed his or her family. So there are issues here that need to be thought about. Locational flexibility. This approach refers to using distance strategies to achieve organisational labour demands. This approach is becoming very common as more organisations are opting in project work, freelance, outsourcing from external agencies. What it means in effect is that organisations buy in resources from other agencies, from other companies perhaps. So it's similar to outsourcing. They're able to get the work done from other agencies. An employer may take on the workforce through an agency, so the agency pays the workers. Now it happens quite a lot. It happens with the National Health Service in the UK. Many doctors, nurses, so on, may work for agencies, and the agency negotiates the pay claim for the worker and then pays the worker. The agency, of course, gets to keep a sum of money for itself. So locational flexibility is a way in which companies can attempt to save by looking at distance strategies, trying to achieve organizational demands. It may be that it implies from a different town or a different area even, and agencies will deliver the workers to the organization to do their work, and the agency perhaps will take a sum as its fee and pay the workers the remaining part. Again, it gives flexibility, but again it's quite controversial. So organizations recruit private sector organizations to take on tasks and work needs. This reduces costs as tasks are allocated to different businesses. So the organisation has less problems with employment contracts and obligations under the law for all sorts of payments and so on. It may be that the work is conducted on someone else's premises even, so that the insurance issues and so on are dealt with by the other company or the other agency. So it's quite cheap for organisations to buy in this way. And it deals with private sector organisations to take on the tasks and the work needs. Again, it sounds like it's more flexibility for the organisation, but again, we have to bear in mind the implications of this for the employees. So it's worth considering this as we work our way through it. Financial flexibility. Well, the accountancy terms, financial flexibility is used to describe a company's ability to react to unexpected expenses and investment opportunities. That's what we mean by financial flexibility. The company should be in a position to be able to deal with unexpected expenses. It should have reserves, perhaps retained profits, and it should also have retained profits available in the event of investment opportunities arising. So in this class, what we've done is looked at flexibility. We've looked at it from different perspectives. We've looked at functional, we've looked at numerical, we've looked at special contracts. Some of it, as I said, is controversial, but one thing for sure, flexibility is on the agenda. It's discussed more and more, it crops up in the literature more and more. There's open discussions about the flexible firm, about the need for flexibility, and there is more emphasis on this as time passes. In addition to that, we have forces, external forces, such as globalisation and the advent of modern technologies, which promote the use of flexible working conditions and flexibility in the labour market. So that's all we're going to deal with in this class, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.